From the earliest years of his intellectual life, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe exhibited a restless curiosity that sought to pierce the veil between the ordinary and the extraordinary, between matter as it appears and matter as it might be understood in its deepest principles. Among the many avenues of inquiry that seized his imagination, alchemy held a particular fascination. Unlike casual dabblers who pursued it for wealth or simple notoriety, Goethe approached alchemy as a profound philosophical and practical discipline, a means to explore the hidden forces of nature and the possibilities of transformation, both material and spiritual. His ambition was nothing less than to discover the ideal substance. A mysterious material capable of purifying, transforming, and perfecting the world of ordinary matter. In Frankfurt, during his youth, Goethe began his first serious engagements with chemical experimentation. He immersed himself in the works of Paracelsus, whose combination of empirical observation, mysticism, and metaphysical speculation offered a model for the integration of science and philosophy. He also studied the writings of Michael Meyer, Agrippa, and other Renaissance figures who treated alchemy not merely as a set of chemical recipes but as a pathway to understanding the universe itself. These texts captivated Goethe not only for their promise of transformation but for the worldview they embodied, a cosmos in which matter and spirit, visible and invisible, were intimately intertwined. He read them not as superstitious manuals but as guides for a disciplined, exploratory practice that could illuminate both the material and moral dimensions of life. Goethe's first experiments were carried out with a combination of youthful daring and meticulous care. In his early Frankfurt residence, he converted a small room into a private laboratory, carefully arranging glassware, retorts, crucibles, and balances. He measured quantities with painstaking precision, heating metals, grinding minerals, and distilling plant extracts in the hope of eliciting subtle transformations. The air in the laboratory quickly became redolent with metallic fumes, acidic odors, and the occasional acrid smoke of compounds burnt in experimental processes. Neighbors occasionally noted strange smells emanating from his home, though Goethe was careful to maintain secrecy, aware of the social skepticism that often met alchemical pursuits. Yet these private trials were more than chemical manipulation, they were exercises in observation, patience, and reflection, each experiment a small probe into the hidden laws of nature. By the time Goethe moved to Leipzig for his university studies, his alchemical interests had deepened and matured. There, amid his formal studies in law and classical literature, he devoted hours to refining techniques of distillation, sublimation, and calcination, always with an eye toward subtle transformations in color, texture, and composition. He documented his experiments with meticulous notes, often sketching apparatus setups and recording the smallest variations in reaction. He became fascinated not only with metals but also with the properties of plant extracts, minerals, and combinations thereof, seeking patterns and correspondences that might hint at underlying principles of transformation. Scholars of the period recall that Goethe's rooms often seemed like miniature theaters of experimentation. Glass vessels gleamed under candlelight, powders and liquids emitted pungent and sometimes acrid odors, and a soft but constant activity of measurement, heating, and stirring continued late into the night. Despite years of careful experimentation, Goethe never produced a literal philosopher's stone or miraculous elixir. Yet this apparent failure is deceptive, for the practice itself profoundly shaped his mind and imagination. The laboratory trained him in observation, patience, and attention to minute detail, skills that he later applied in his botanical and geological studies. In examining plants, he sought to discern not only their outward forms but the processes of growth and transformation that governed them, mirroring the same careful attention he had brought to alchemical experimentation. Similarly, his study of minerals and natural formations reflected an underlying principle gleaned from alchemy, that matter is not static but in constant motion. Transformation and renewal. The influence of alchemy extended beyond science into Goethe's literary work, seeding motifs and imagery that would become central to his creative output. In Faust, the pursuit of ultimate knowledge, the struggle to transform the self and the world, and the tension between material and spiritual forces echo the goals and frustrations of his alchemical experiments. The laboratory, the crucible of experimentation, observation, and reflection, became, in a sense, a metaphor for the mind itself, a place where ideas, sensations, and insights combined to produce transformations of understanding rather than matter. Similarly, the meticulous attention to processes of growth, decay, and metamorphosis that he developed through alchemical practice informed his poetic descriptions of nature, lending them a precision and depth that transcended mere aesthetic representation. Goethe's alchemical pursuits also exemplify the integration of science, philosophy, and art that defined his thought. He did not separate experiment from contemplation, chemistry from poetry, or observation from imagination. Instead, he treated each as complementary approaches to understanding reality. This integration is evident in the way he approached phenomena such as color, light, and form, exploring their physical properties while remaining attuned to their symbolic and experiential resonances. Alchemy taught him to perceive the unity of opposites, heat and cold, solid and fluid, material and spiritual, a conceptual framework that permeated both his scientific and literary work. In later years, even as Goethe's attention shifted to other studies, botany, anatomy, optics, and literature, the lessons of alchemy remained embedded in his methods and philosophy. He maintained a reverence for the subtle, interconnected forces of nature, an insistence on careful observation, and a recognition of transformation as a universal principle. In this sense, the ideal substance he sought in the laboratory became an ideal of thought, a synthesis of empirical insight, philosophical reflection, and imaginative vision. It was a substance that transformed not the external world in miraculous ways, but his own capacity to perceive, understand, and depict it. The richness of Goethe's alchemical practice lies, therefore, not in its material success but in its lasting influence on his intellectual, scientific, and literary development. It provided a framework for meticulous observation, an appreciation of natural processes, and an imaginative vocabulary of transformation. The metals, minerals, and plant extracts he studied, the glassware he handled, the heat and fumes he endured, all became part of a lived experience that informed his metaphors, his scientific descriptions, and his philosophical reflections. Alchemy was, for Goethe, both laboratory and literary device, practical investigation and symbolic exploration, a crucible in which the elements of the natural world and the elements of thought were continually tested, transformed, and refined. Through this lens, Goethe's alchemy is revealed as a microcosm of his broader intellectual life, a relentless pursuit of understanding, a willingness to bridge disciplines, and a capacity to see in the smallest transformations the reflection of universal truths. The elusive ideal substance may never have materialized in his flasks, yet it lived in the rigorous observation, imaginative synthesis, and philosophical insight that became the hallmark of Goethe's enduring legacy. It is in this alchemical interplay between experiment and reflection, matter and spirit, observation and imagination, that we glimpse the full depth of his genius, a genius that sought to transform not only substances in the laboratory but thought, perception, and art itself.